Today is a day of joy and hope. Today is a day where we're asked as a church to rejoice. And we have that literally in the colour that we wear as the priests, as we have on our altar today, having this pink, reminding us of joy, reminding us to rejoice and to have hope in the midst of the struggles of life. When I was growing up, I would say pink was pretty much a colour that girls would wear. You wouldn't see guys wearing pink very much. I think over the last 20 years, though, it's become more common for men to wear pink as well. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this. Here in Australia, the role of the McGrath Foundation to encourage all of the community to support women who are suffering from breast cancer. We see it with the Sydney Test match, where all the men and everybody else wears pink at the Sydney Test. You see it in different merchandising and other things as a way of reminding us to still be positive and joyful within our community and to do what we can to bring that positivity and joy to others. And that's a great reminder for us. We've had this in the church for a long, long time, but sometimes we've not perhaps focused as well on this. Some of the older parishioners might have seen pink worn over the years. Some priests didn't like wearing pink because they thought, oh, that was the girls' colour and we'll just wear purple. And perhaps that was a good decision maybe, I don't know. The church reminds us to be positive. And in the midst sometimes of sin, of brokenness, of disasters, we need people to be joyful and to be hopeful, to say things are not all doom and gloom. There is a future, and the future is actually good. It's bright. There might be some hard roads ahead, and over the next couple of weeks, we're going to start to think about those hard roads. We're going to think about what Jesus did on the cross. But we're also thinking beyond the cross, because we know we are not just people of Good Friday, we are people of Easter Sunday, of the resurrection and the hope. So in the midst of our preparation for Holy Week, we pause for a day of thinking about the darkness of that period to think beyond that, to think to the joys of the resurrection. Today we have a couple of readings that are quite challenging for us. Very lengthy reading we had as our gospel today. The story sometimes referred to as the prodigal son, or perhaps sometimes the story of the loving father. And perhaps also there can be things said about the other brother. Within some families, if you've grown up around siblings, sometimes there can be sibling rivalry. And if you grow up in a particular culture, sometimes the oldest son will inherit everything. He will take on the responsibility of leading the family once the father has died. And that experience is still present even in some parts of the world today. And if you're the younger sibling, sometimes it can be very difficult for you. We've seen this in more recent times with sometimes the siblings of presidents of the United States. What are they meant to do? We see this a little bit in Australia with sometimes the siblings of certain prominent politicians. But in the US it's become quite well known. Sometimes the situation, you look at Bill Clinton's younger brother. What becomes of Bill Clinton's younger brother? That's the challenge. And that's the challenge for him as well. And we see this, I think, if you read anything of the gossip magazines and all those sort of things, you see this in the life of Prince Harry these days. What becomes of him? William is going to become a king. William's now got kids. They'll have kids. And he's gone from being second or third in line to becoming what is now sixth or seventh. Before you know it, he'll be beyond 10th in line to the throne of England. And what becomes of him? And so Prince Harry, you could say, was a little bit like the prodigal son. He decided to get up one day and said, well, I've had enough of all this. Me and my wife, we're going to go and live our lives separately. And you can imagine that happening back in ancient times as well, where you've got a younger brother who might have perhaps a controlling or domineering older brother. I'm not saying that's what Prince William is. But imagine that occurring, and the younger brother says, I've got to get out of here. This is not good for me, it's not good for the family. Comes to his dad, said, give me what's owing to me when you die. I'm getting out of here. I'm going to set up my life somewhere else. And we see this happening in a modern context as well. And then in the Gospels, we're told that bad times came to this son who left. Perhaps it was drought, perhaps it was floods, perhaps he'd invested in the wrong things, but he ended up losing everything. And then ends up working, looking after the pigs and eating what the pigs eat, which for a Jewish person is particularly challenging. And it's meant to be intense in the scriptures. For the Jewish people, they didn't, even today, they don't eat pork. They don't eat things that come from pigs. But you were literally told that this young guy who lost everything is there looking after the pigs. And then he realises he might be able to go home and help with his family as a servant. And he comes home and we're told the father welcomes him with joy. He welcomes him home and he dresses him like royalty. He said, put a robe on him, sandals on his feet, put a ring on him, because my son's returned and there is a reason to rejoice. If only we could be like this father in our own lives. Often what happens is that when someone leaves under pretty unfortunate circumstances, it can hurt. It hurts deeply. And sometimes it's really difficult to forgive, and it's really difficult to even pick up the phone to ring a person who's left or to send a message to say, how you doing? Let alone to welcome them back as if they had never gone, to welcome them back like royalty. But this is what the charism is there of this father. Immense joy, forgiveness and love. And we're called to have that in our own lives. When hard times come, we don't become controlled by those moments of darkness, but we stay joyful. And then you see the experience of the older brother. The older brother recognizes the younger brother has come home, but still has that anger in his heart. And then he transfers that anger from his own younger brother, he transfers that to his father. He tells off and he berates his father, why are you putting on a party for him? You did nothing to me. You've made me a slave. It's literally what the older brother has said to his father. He's lacking that joy in his life. We need that joy in the midst of difficult times. And what happened over the last 2 years, some people stayed joyful. They were able to stay happy in the midst of this time, to stay positive. And others turned inside themselves and became quite dark. Do what we can to lift people up, to be joyful, to witness to the hope that's beyond the moment of darkness. Christians should be known for our joy. And the second reading says that we're called to be ambassadors of Christ. These two children today are becoming ambassadors for Christ. Their parents, their godparents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, we are all called to be ambassadors of Christ. That means we are representatives of Christ in the world. And we represent Christ by our faith, by our service, but we also do that by our hope, by our joy. So thank you for the joy that you bring to each other, that you bring to others, because that's the quality of the Christian. When people think of Christians, they shouldn't necessarily think, first of all, of our passion for social justice, although that's important. They shouldn't necessarily think of our doctrine or our worship, although these things are important. First of all, they should think of our positivity and joy in the midst of challenges, because we all have challenges, but we should be known for lifting people up in the moments of darkness. So on this day, this Rose Sunday, the pink Sunday in the life of the church, let's be positive, let's be joyful, and let's be ambassadors of Christ that bring joy to others in all times of our life, at all that we do. Congratulations to our two families in preparation for our baptisms. We have two beautiful names, Clara, which is named after both St. Clare of Assisi and a Polish saint, or a Polish blessed, Blessed Clara Szeszenza. And we have Tess, what's the middle name? Tess Amelia. Tess is named after, do you know which saint? It is Teresa. Very good. There's a few of them. There is Saint Therese of Lisieux, beautiful saint who's known as the Little Flower. And there's also Saint Teresa of Avila. So beautiful name, Tess, reminding us of the presence of the saints and that joy in the midst of our difficulties.